Notice Norge is on, Native's on, and I'm not sure who else. But thank you for doing this. Thanks for having me.
Oh, well, welcome aboard. Yes. All right, Josefina. Oh, sorry, no, Fernando.
Hello, everybody. I'm Fernando Bellezzi from Prime Asia. I'm responsible for sustainability. And when we talk about sustainability, we are talking about the deficiencies in our plants, the integrity of our products, but also how we engage with our supply chain in developing best practices that will benefit the entire value chain.
Perfect. Viv?
Hi, I'm Viv Hamill, and I'm the senior footwear tech for a company in the UK. And I'm just really wanting to listen in to learn more about the sustainable side of leather.
Brilliant. Good. Josefina.
Hello, my name is Josefina Eisel. I work for Textile Exchange and also for the Global Roundtable for Sustainable Beef. I'm based in Buenos Aires, Argentina, and my work is more focused on the pilot at farm level. Thank you.
Hey, Bruno? Bruno Kestenband. Well, we'll wait for Bruno to unmute later on. Kristen, it's great to see all these names.
Good morning.
Hey.
Hi guys. Sorry, my computer is not stable. I work for Banana Republic on the fabric R&D team, and I listen in because I'm teaching myself about leather, and this is a good resource for it.
Perfect. Okay. Mauricia. Oh, Unich, great. I see you have Mauricia Cantu from Unich. And Sabrina, do you want to say hello? Mauricia, when you have a time to unmute, you can unmute. But Sabrina, do you want to say hello?
Hello, everyone. I'm Sabrina Frontini from ICEC. I'm the director of ICEC, and our institute is focused on voluntary certification in the leather sector. I'm really happy to be here and to see your update on your LIA Impact Accelerator. Thank you.
Fantastic. And Sarah, great to see you, Sarah.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sarah Shields with Humane Society International.
All right, and then the last one I'm seeing on my list is Stephanie Race.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Race. I'm the founder and CEO of Earth Labs Group, and we're a remote sensing company that monitors livestock grazing for the beef, dairy, and leather industry, and we work across 28 different commodities, specifically focused on the tropics. So we do crops and livestock in regenerative grazing, but we also do mixed farming, agroforestry, silvopasture. So we're a quasi project developer, but we're engaged in international supply chains with the private sector as well as with development finance institutes. We also have a fund for climate adaptation and are working with 2 different apparel companies on leather supply chains to essentially limit their deforestation risk.
Jeez, wow. So glad you landed with us.
Thanks for having me. I'm an American living in the UK, and our work is global, and we've been doing this for about 12 years. Our collaborators are scientists from Rothamsted, Colorado State. So we have an international team of 56 scientists. So we've developed a comprehensive greenhouse gas emissions monitoring platform, carbon sequestration, the whole stack, including biodiversity. So we have essentially the foundation for the environmental outcome verification, similar to what the Savory Institute does, but our methods are all published in the public literature, and we have experiments have been going on for over 10 years in 4 different countries on livestock. Thanks for having me. I'll be quiet now.
Well, no, that's great. And can you send a note even through the chat to Josefina to share your contact details? Because we're going to have a lot to follow up on.
Yeah, I have we have two companies and our websites are being relaunched. So,
Perfect.
but I'll send you my email addresses and you can, and I'll send you some other links to podcasts that we've done that describe all of our work. So we're doing work at the landscape scale, not just on livestock, but also in mixed landscapes at the watershed level.
Perfect. Okay,
Great.
and then one more person who's come in, Rachel. Tam, do you want to say hello and introduce yourself?
Yeah. Let's see. Hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm Rachel. I'm on the environmental sustainability team at TJX. So, yeah, here to really learn more about like leather, as well as like I've been helping the PD teams within TJX to understand the different textile exchange standards. So, here to listen and nice to meet everyone.
Wow. Well, what an opportunity. And first, thank you, everyone. Last time we didn't do the introductions. I know they take a bit of time, but I think having the voices and getting everybody speaking will hopefully get the juices going to start asking the questions. What I'm going to do is ask if anybody has questions, you can ask them right away. Otherwise, we'll probably go through a bit of an overview of what LIA is, because it sounds like a lot of folks just want to get an update and a learning. And then the theme of today's clinic is corporate commitments, but historically these drop-in clinics kind of go all over the map. So really it is an Ask Me Anything. So thanks, Nicole, for running the slides. Everybody just keep in mind that the antitrust statement applies here. Next. And we're not recording this session. We will have the hub, which is a follow-up area. So if you should be getting a link to the hub. If you're not on our stakeholder list, just contact us, LIA@textileexchange.org, and be sure that you're listed on the hub. And then that way you're having access to all of our resources and so on. Next slide. So I'm going to start. Nicole, do you want me to lead this one, or do you want to speak to any of these?
No, sure. Just go ahead. And
Right. Yeah, so everything is grounded in the new vision of textile exchange. Textile exchange has actually been around since 2002, when we really started as organic exchange to grow the supply and demand for organic cotton. And then we've since evolved into textile exchange, and our overall focus is on fibers and materials and driving sustainability. And then just recently, we launched a new vision, which is to envision a textile industry that protects and restores the environment while enhancing lives. And our big, hairy, audacious goal is that we aspire to guide the textile industry to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 45% from a 2020 baseline. And I mean, this is an enormous goal. But we're super energized by it. And frankly, I think we all know that this is the type of goal that everybody in the industry needs to be making. So we talk about it as our Climate Plus goal, because the plus represents the partnerships and all the relationships that we need to work with to make it happen. And then it also means that we're still keeping a focus on soil health, biodiversity, and water. And some of the interventions that we will take, like protection of forests or restoration or regenerative grazing, will address all of these anyway. So it's a multi-tier solution. All right, next slide. Quick snapshot of our team. We're not against men, but it just happened that it's all women here that are running this team. So let's see, starting at the left, we've got Nicole, who's running the leather production committee work. She was on maternity leave. She has a delightful child to show for that. So during that time, we had Deborah Taylor, who had been with the LWG and is now running her own organization, who took over for a few months and was a huge contributor. Nicole's based in Paris. Deborah is out of the UK. Larissa is based in Belarus, and she holds us all together, does the administration. Josefina, as we said, is in Argentina. That's me up there. I am based in Quebec, in Canada. And then we have Stephanie Pekorski, who can't join us today, but she is based in British Columbia. And last but absolutely not least is Anna Heaton, who is the chair of our Animal Welfare Committee, and she's based in the UK. All right, next. I think this is, if you can go back to that one, Nicole. You get the whole slide of who's contributed, but I think it's really important to just pause for a moment and look at all of the companies who have contributed to the development of LIA. And these are financial contributors, and the list is even huge, more vast with all the people who have contributed their time and expertise. But this really shows that the interest in LIA is really profound among the brands, to the point where people are actually putting their money in, even in times of a lot of economic uncertainty. So a huge thanks to these folks. Next. This is a longer list, and I think this presentation will be available on the website in some form or another. But we've had a number of scope committees, again, really good representation from throughout the industry. And we can't say enough thanks to everybody who's made all the contributions. Next. So LIA, we have now over almost 650 stakeholders that we've been engaging with. We have a list of everybody who's contacted us. They're the people that we reach out to. And then we developed the international working group, and everybody on that group had to sign a charter, and those are who are doing the voting. So yeah, I think we can go on from here. So let me get into the Leather Impact Accelerator. So this is LIA all in one go. If you look at it starting from the left, we've got the solutions for what I call the live animal part of the supply chain. So we have the deforestation conversion-free protocol that applies to all the farms. We have the animal welfare benchmark that applies from farm to slaughter. We have a set of leather production benchmarks, one for social and one for environmental, that apply to all the finishing stages of leather. And then in both areas, we have a set of traceability guidelines that are ultimately going to build towards a fully traceable supply chain. And then because the supply chain is not easily traceable, we've developed the concept of the impact incentives that I'll explain further, as essentially a credit trading system that allow brands to connect back to the farms even without being able to have that traceability in the supply chain. And then everything's held together by a claims framework, which is where we give the value to the brands for participating and ensure that everything's accurate and credible. Next slide. So this is what LIA looks like on quote unquote paper. There's a lot of different components, and all of these are available on the website, Leather Impact Accelerator. If you just Google that, it'll come up. And this is actually the main core components. There's about, I think, 10 or 11 different documents that support it. Next slide. Let's just slip through that. That previous slide, I'll just say that we're in version 0.1, which means that we are in our pilot year. So not everything is being tested out. At the end of the year, we're going to look at how everything's gone, what are some of the changes that'll be made, where do we run into problems, and then we'll do a revision and then release version 1.0, and then that should be good for a period of 3 years. So on the scopes, we have, first of all, we have the deforestation conversion free. We don't really call it a benchmark, we call it a protocol, because it's not like you can almost deforest or partially stop deforesting. You have to fully deforest. So we have gone with the accountability framework of zero gross deforestation or conversion. I know that some of the other organizations, like even in the beef industry, they go for more of a legal compliance perspective, but we've, particularly in working with the National Wildlife Federation, felt that we really had to go, take these bold steps. Zero gross deforestation or conversion. It's definitely a crisis in some of the more critical parts of the world, and this is what we need to meet those Carbon Plus goals. So the cutoff date is January 1st, 2020, and then we do apply regional cutoff dates, like where there's a soy moratorium, or sort of the, in the Amazon and so on. There may be regional cutoff dates that are earlier than that, and those will apply. All right, next one. Animal welfare. This is a little more complicated. We have developed a pure benchmark here. When we started looking at the Leather Impact Accelerator work, we realized, there are a lot of cattle farms are already working with other standards that have been developed for the livestock industry, or specifically for the cattle industry. And so we weren't going to really be helping by creating yet one more standard. And it's also given the fact that the leather industry has on the cattle industry, we really wanted to just add value to the work that other organizations are already doing. So there's things like the Global Animal Partnership, Humane Society International, RSPCA. I think there's some others, they're skipping my mind right now. But all of these, and then there's regional standards that are in play. So what we wanted to do is create a framework where we can give recognition to those standards. And then when listening particularly to the concerns of the animal welfare group, we realized we couldn't do a single benchmark. We needed to have some tiers to give recognition to these standards. So the baseline really represents the 5 freedoms: freedom from pain and discomfort, freedom from thirst and hunger, etc. And that's what you might call the minimum level of animal care that is expected. Some may question, why do we even have that? However, in many parts of the world, they are not even meeting the baseline. And so it's really important that we give recognition to the farms to meet that baseline, and then they can move up to higher levels, options 1, 2, and 3. Option 3 being kind of the highest level, what we'd say are the 5 domains, where it's more these positive states of animal health and well-being. But the different levels kind of progressively add more requirements. And again, these aren't the farms that meet these benchmarks, it's the standards that meet the benchmarks, and then the farms will get certified to those standards. Next slide. Nicole, why don't you just say a few words about the next 2 scopes? These are really yours.
Sorry, trying to unmute myself. So as Anne was saying, for the animal welfare part of LIA, here for the leather production, we've also developed a standard benchmark. So the idea is to identify and recognize standards that already exist and that are used in the leather production industry. So what we call leather production under LIA is all transformation stages of hide to leather, from beam house all the way to finished leather. And so we have a social scope, which is based on the SSCI benchmarking requirements. But we've, so it's based on it, but we've gone a bit further. Well, we've included a little more in there. Sorry. And then we have the environmental standard benchmark, which is also based on the LWG environmental audit protocol, and it's the bronze level. So yeah.
Okay. I get to talk about impact incentives. It's my baby. So impact incentives, I mean, in the end, as I said, it's essentially a credit trading system but we've added a lot of elements to the design of the impact incentives to make them, in our mind, better. First of all, to explain how it works, brands will buy let me start at the other side. The yellow dots here are the farms, any place with the live animals, and they will meet a set of requirements. So they can either meet the animal welfare scope, they can meet the DCF scope, or they can meet both of them. They also need to supply farm information. So there's a lot of questions that we ask so that we can really report out on really robust data. And we ask them to be engaging in some form of a traceability system. And the idea here is we want to build up the supply of responsible and traceable cattle so that ultimately we can create a fully traceable supply network. Then the brands or the retailers, and this can be for leather, they can be for beef, we share the same animal, they can buy certificates, and essentially one certificate is equal to one cow over 1 year on a farm. And we have a bunch of calculators that figure out the number of cows to create that. We also have calculators for the brands to figure out if you want to relate your impact incentive purchase to your hide usage. We have calculators to do all that. So then the brands can make claims, and they can say, we're for 50% of our hide usage, we're buying impact incentives. And and then we have some other elements to the impact incentives. One is there's all the data and transparency. We only allow incentive trading with some kind of small technical exceptions between the yellow dots. And the idea is that we want to really maximize the efficiency of the system so that in other systems, they'll let anybody in the supply chain purchase the incentives and then add it to the cost of goods sold. And then, you can end up multiplying the premium that the farmer is given through the supply chain, and you lose some of that cost efficiency. And probably even more importantly, you lose the transparency of where the incentive is going, where the impacts are happening. We also do not allow for we don't allow for any speculation. Every time incentive is traded, it's in a back-to-back trade, which means somebody can't buy impact incentives, hold on to them for 6 months until the price goes up, speculation, and then sell them for a higher price. I think those are the main points. All right, next slide. And then probably the most interesting part of the impact incentives is the potential they have through the impact partnerships. So if you look at this graph on the left-hand side, the upper left, if we set our minimum level best practices, which is basically our benchmark, and it could be around animal welfare, deforestation, soil health, eventually we'll add more and more scopes to LIA. Then if you look at Farm A, they can, they're meeting everything. So they don't need any support. They can trade impact incentives directly. They're meeting the scopes, they get themselves registered, and then they sell to brands. B and C, both of them are not meeting all of the minimum requirements yet. And these are the farmers that, in some ways, where you can have the greatest impact. The farmers that you need to bring from a lower level of practice up to a higher one. So this is where we want to support the change whenever possible. And so this really works through the partnership model. So if you come to the big circular diagram here, the way it works is that brands will buy the impact incentives from on-the-ground program partners that are working with those groups of farms to help them get up to that minimum level of best practice. So they'll give them training, they'll help with verification, they'll collect the data, they'll get everything kind of administratively set up so that ultimately the farmers will be able to meet the minimum bar and to get the impact incentives registered. In the money that the brands would pay to the program partner, there may also be some financial incentive that goes directly to the farm, or it might go into investments into equipment or infrastructure that are needed. So a farm can qualify, can sit under the program partner for up to 3 years, but after that, we expect that they will meet that minimum threshold and then move on to selling impact incentives directly or to physically trading, their premium product, leather, beef, or whatever it's going to be. So brands can support both sides. A strategy can be we're going to support program partners, and then as the farmers graduate, then we'll either buy the impact incentives from them or buy the physical hides from them. So this really helps build up the overall supply of more responsible cattle, leather, beef, etc.
So before we move on to the next one, we have our first question. And just a reminder to everyone, please just feel free to send your questions in the chat, or you can also unmute yourself at any time. We're just going to go through these slides as long as we don't have questions, basically. So this is a question from Sabrina. So her question is, do you have a benchmark only for bovine leathers, or do we also have for exotic goats, sheep, etc.? Can you give an example?
Yeah, the answer is very easy. We only have it for bovine. Very early on, as we were developing our leather work, we had to address, what is the scope for the leathers that we're going to look at? And most of the users, most of our stakeholders are using the cattle leather. We have, particularly with our work with wool and now alpaca and mohair, there's been quite a bit of interest, or pockets of interest, I should say, in how do we develop this for other animals. But we don't have anything for exotics. Textile Exchange hasn't stepped into the world of exotics. I think others are covering that. And maybe down the road, we may be able to apply impact incentives for goat, sheep, and probably the one area where I'm most interested in applying it sooner than later is actually cashmere, because that's another one where there's, particularly in Mongolia, a lot of complexity in trying to trace through a very difficult supply chain with areas that are completely opaque. So hopefully that helps. Here's how we can work it all through. So I'm going to talk you through how the impact incentives work. So we start with the farm. First thing, we get a third-party verification body who will assess, do they meet the scope requirements? Is the data, they'll review the data. They will be sure that that data is correct and accurate. And this is really important because this supports the claims at the end. They'll also check on the traceability, etc. If the answer is yes, then that third party will be the one to register the impacts incentives onto the trading platform. Then we also talked about the partnership model. So if there's a group of farms that need to be supported to meet that minimum level of best practices, then it's the impact partnership. Same thing, third-party verification, third-party registration. And then the impact incentives will, when there's demand, they will flow through not just the impact incentives, but all the data that is attached to them. And then we work with a facilitator, and they actually play a really key role. The one that we're currently working with is ACT Commodities, and they've been a huge partner for us in developing the impact incentives. And they will be the ones to work with the brands to match up the needs of the brands back to the farms. And it's kind of that matchmaking service. And they also, if you can click a couple more times, Nicole, they will help support the flow of cash. And if you think about that, that in itself is already a really big deal, because you as a retailer, you don't want to be dealing with multiple currencies, sending to different, even individual farmers around the world. So they manage all those logistics. And then they also really help support the brands to tell the stories, to make the claims. So, And then the other thing that we get out of all of this work, not just for the beef, but not just for leather, but also for beef and all users of the Impact Incentives trading platform, is we're going to get some really interesting data as we get going. So we can export that data to NGOs, governments, other third parties that are collecting it. And then also, for each of the users, Textile Exchange, we want to look at the overall number of acres of forest that we've preserved, and then the whole Impact Alliance, which I'll explain in a second. If you click one more time, Nicole. The Impact Alliance, there's a number of us that are all working together. We've created another organization because the world needs way more organizations in it. But this is hopefully a good one. But basically, as we started looking at the impact incentives, we realized this is a model that has so much power for so many different commodity groups. And we started with a fairly tight group. We've got Textile Exchange. We're looking currently active with impact incentives for cotton and leather. We have GRSB, which Josefina is part of as well, for beef. We have Global Food Partners for cage-free eggs, and we have Proterra for soy and sugar. And we're working really closely to set up all the policies and procedures, and basically sharing our expertise and pooling our funds to develop the Impact Alliance, and with the partnership of Chainpoint and ACT Commodities, who've invested in the trading platform, we think we've got a really effective system that saves us all from investing multiple times, but also brings a lot of value to the users. If you think of a rather large, well-known Swedish brand that it does primarily furniture, they'll be using cotton, leather, beef in the meatballs, chicken, soy, sugar. They've got their food thing. They're enormous. What if they had only one system to work with? Where there's a lot of parallel design elements, so that they can work with a single system across multiple commodities. Or you may have a cattle farmer in Uruguay that is obviously creating both cattle and leather, and they may rotate with soy. Often most cattle farms have soy, and they may even rotate in some cotton. So again, if they're working with a single system, it's going to create a lot more efficiencies and a lot more power. Next slide.
We have one question. Does T see the possibility of using verification that is already in place at farm level as a way of verifying if they meet the requirements, for instance, regenerative or organic, etc.? A question from Fernando.
Excellent question, Fernando. So the answer is yes. And then, of course, it depends. So if our specific scopes are animal welfare and deforestation conversion free right now, if there is a verification that a farm is using that does meet our DCF or animal welfare requirements, then that will be absolutely accepted. The interesting part of that question is that you're stepping into where we're heading next. So with the impact incentives, we're looking at, we're first of all giving recognition to just standards, like established, globally recognized standards. So organic is one of those. If it's IFOAM accredited or IFOAM recognized, then we're looking to add that as a single scope that can be independent of animal welfare DCF. Regenerative is such a big topic. It is hugely, not even on our radar. We're actually working really hard on it behind the scenes, trying to figure out how do we define regenerative so that we can link it through to a scope for impact incentives, or also to kind of give recognition to various certifications for potentially a chain of custody standard. I'm just going to speak personally. The term regenerative is getting used in so many ways by so many different people that it's becoming a little bit like the term sustainable. So, and there's so many different players. I mean, it's not just the textile industry that's talking about regenerative, it's the food industry. and the farming industry and so on. So I think we need to figure out who do we talk to and who do we align with to define what regenerative is, and then how do we link over use the impact incentives to give that link back to them. So super interesting conversation. If anybody wants to be, kind of has anything to contribute to that, or can give us some single global definition of regenerative, would really happily receive that information. Okay. Oh, yep. I will live in eager anticipation of that. Okay. Yes. So now to the actual topic of today's.
Can I interrupt you? Sorry, I just want to add a comment to what you're saying, to your answer, which I think it's very interesting that at least Textile Exchange is open to evaluating those verifications, those certifications that are already in place. Because what I see, sometimes maybe they are not enough to fulfill, let's say, the level 3 requirements, but they could be a good way of verifying the initial levels of compliance. So at least you can engage those farms in an initial level, and then you just start adding some extra requirements. So this is an area which I think it's very interesting, and I believe Textile Exchange is in the right direction by thinking to evaluate those certifications.
Great. Yeah. Thank you. It's I think the scope for the impact incentives is huge. We're trying to be very thoughtful and careful about moving forward, because it's pretty easy to just, basically go nuts on them, and then they could lose some of their meaning and credibility. We also have a lot of interest from other NGOs. We've probably got 4 or 5 NGOs kind of waiting in the wings to potentially join the Impact Alliance. So it's one of those things where you want to move quickly because of the need to drive the change, but we want to be careful to be sure that we don't lose any of the value. Okay, so is that good, Fernando?
Yes, very good. Thank you very much, Anne.
So the LIA claims guide. So this is a really important part of the Leather Impact Accelerator in terms of giving the value to the brands. And for those brands who've been working with our other standards, GRS, OCS, RDS, RWS, et cetera, we have Stephanie, who unfortunately isn't on this call. She has done a huge amount of work to be sure there's a really good alignment between the claims for LIA versus the standards. And she actually does all the claims process for the standards, so she's well positioned for that. So there are 3 categories, and I will say it's a bit of a complicated document up front. You may find that it looks pretty long. On the other hand, if you just read the sections that are most relevant to you, you'll be fine. But there's the general marketing claims, so that's going to be talking about the LIA corporate commitment. There's assured claims, and that will be something that is verified through a standard, a benchmark approval, the certification, the actual purchase of impact incentives, or any other data that we've got that we want that kind of verification level on. And then there's the informational statements that talking about LIA and the impact incentives, more of a general, almost a storytelling element. So maybe next slide. So the corporate commitment, this has gone through many evolutions of thinking to get here. And I think in the end, we've ended up with something that is relatively as simple as possible. So we talk about the corporate commitment. This is, well, basically we have 2 modules. One is regarding the use of the impact incentives, and the other is around addressing the supply chains, the mapping and the certification. And brands ideally would commit to both, but we also are supporting individual, like a brand might say, we're only going to focus on the raw material source, we're going to focus on impact incentives only, or they could just focus on module 2. So the other thing that we have is, for anybody who knows Textile Exchange and has been part of us for a while, we have the corporate fiber materials benchmark. It is a very well-known industry tool, and it allows brands to come in and report on their progress towards more preferred fibers materials across a whole range of fibers materials. So, you know, cotton, recycled polyester, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of kind of benefits. There's a whole other webinar that would go around explaining how the CFMB works. And if you are interested, please let us know, because we'd be super happy to connect you through to that. But for the sake of this discussion, I'll just say that we have a really good tool that you will report in. You can just focus on leather only, and then this will allow us to kind of keep track of your progress and then deliver reports. Sorry, this is Stephanie, who was meant to be talking about this, so I'm not going to be perfect on all these commitment sessions. Okay, maybe flip through that. Do we have more on the commitments? Yeah, this is where you get to see the entire Leather Impact Accelerator. You can see here there's some corporate commitment guidance in there. And then what's the next slide, Nicole? Yeah, I'd like to actually pause here, and maybe if I can take over screen sharing. And I'd like to go to the corporate commitments. In the meantime, if anybody has any questions, please do ask. Sorry, I'm just going to have to download some of these. All right, so I am, hopefully you can see my screen. Apologies for the messiness here. But in the commitment guide, I do want to talk through it a little bit further. The impact incentives module is setting brands up to basically balance out their use of leather through impact incentives within a time period. We're suggesting 5 years. If a brand, if that's too much, you know, they can extend the time frame. We're really asking for a maximum of 10 years from 2021. And this is still keeping in mind our overall goal with the Leather Impact Accelerator and our Climate Plus goals, et cetera. But if you're going for the 5-year goal, each year you would buy 20% more impact incentives. So if you use, say, 1,000 hides, basically, in year 1 you'd buy 200 impact incentives. Year 2 you'd buy 400, 600, etc. So this gives brands the time to ramp themselves up. It also gives us the time to, you know, connect to the farms, etc. We do have, as I said, the calculator that will help figure out your leather usage. Then on the supply chain commitment, we're asking for 2 things. One is to map your supply chain, and then in each year, again, pick a time frame. Let's go for 5 years again, and say each year you'll map 1 step further in your supply chain. So that means just really simple. You need to identify the name, their address, and a contact person. But then you also need to ensure that they are meeting a standard that meets our environmental benchmark, and also a standard that meets the social benchmark. So for many, many of the brands that we talk to, they're already meeting a lot of the environmental ones because LWG is so prevalent, but there's also really good work happening with iCheck and UNIC and then some others that are coming along. but we're not seeing as much in the social compliance. But when we talked to the brands, that was a really big element. They said, we want to be sure that that social compliance is happening. So the idea is over each year, you would map one tier further into your supply chain to be sure that everything is meeting up. And then again, it's reporting through on the CFMB. So the idea is, if we can get a really good volume of brands signing on to both of those modules, we're going to have in 5 years, a lot of the supply chains are mapped through to the slaughterhouse. We're also going to have a very large supply of farms that are not only meeting our benchmarks for DCF and animal welfare, but they're also traceable. Like they're engaging some kind of traceability, whether it's as simple as ideally an RFID ear tag system. It could be branding, which obviously we don't encourage, but in some cases that's a legal requirement, or some kind of other way to trace the individual cattle. And the idea is once we've got a large volume of traceable cattle, we've got supply chain mapped, we'll have a really good way to connect up and create a very traceable supply chain. The things that we also have to work on in the next 5 years is working with those slaughterhouses to be sure that they have those systems to give that level of traceability, and then also to just keep monitoring all the different traceability systems that are out there, from laser marking to hole punching to DNA taggants and so on. So we'll try to pull all that together, and then it will allow hopefully within the next 5 years, and kind of enough momentum or enough opportunity that brands can actually trace all the way back through to the source level of like the initial cow-calf farm, and make very strong and robust statements about being deforestation conversion free in their supply chains or in addressing the animal welfare. So I'll just give you a quick view of the claims guide.
Oh, and we've got one question. Do you, so this is Sabrina again, do you recognize in your assessment only LWG protocol or also other standards? For instance, ISO 14001, SA 8000, etc. Do you have a map that summarizes these recognized standards by TE?
And I will let you answer that one, Nicole.
Yeah, I can answer that one. Yeah, so Sabrina, to be very clear again, the idea is to benchmark multiple standards and see which ones reach the benchmark we have set. So the idea is not to only recognize LWG. Today, LWG is the only standard that we have recognized, but we will be in the process of benchmarking other standards in the coming months. So I think we'll have another couple of standards, environmental standards that will be approved by LIA. To tell you the truth, when it comes to SA 8000, I believe that will also, so on the social side, will also be benchmarked. And I believe that SA 8000 will meet our benchmark without any problem, as will other social standards so all of that will be made official as soon as it's done. When it comes to ISO 14001, we haven't benchmarked it yet. We could do it, but I do not believe it will reach our benchmark, to tell you the truth, because it's more of it's less of an impact-based standard and more of a management standard. And so in that sense, we don't think it will reach our benchmark, but we're happy to discuss this with you further if you'd like us to benchmark it. We can always see what could work there. So the idea when it comes to all these standards, so this goes for the environmental and social standards for leather production, as well as the animal welfare standards. If you in your company or if you're a standard owner, please just reach out to us if you're interested in getting a standard benchmarked. and we will be very willing to do it. So, yeah. And just to come back one last time, we will have a summary of all recognized standards once the benchmarks are done.
Great. All right. Well, I think I've probably said everything I can think of. The best really is to go into the LIA website, and if you're interested in claims or benchmarking or everything, everything is here. Some of the documents repeat themselves, but I would suggest that you just go in based on what part of the supply chain you're representing, and you can see everything. So the animal welfare benchmark appears for both farmers and standard owners, so you can see that, but it's the same document. So, yeah, that's we are planning to expand a little bit more in the website in terms of some additional resources just to help people with using LIA and also getting some more background information. But if you have any suggestions on what you'd like to be seeing, particularly in terms of the website and how we can support you to move forward, then let us know. The other thing I'll say is we are starting our pilot process. We've been started for a little while, but ACT Commodities that I was telling you about is now reaching out, and we're having some phone calls with brands to actually start getting that impact incentive purchasing happening. So hopefully we'll be reporting out on that. It's first few steps are always the hardest, but we do have a really good project in Brazil called Produzem Deserto, a number of farms. They're doing really great work on deforestation. They're actually already meeting our deforestation conversion-free requirements, but they're using the partnership model to get to move themselves towards being certified for animal welfare. So it's a really good story for that. So you've got about 2 minutes to ask any last questions. Otherwise, I can just wish you a good day.